The meeting is now 7:11. I'm calling the meeting to order and welcome everyone to our first meeting to discuss what we're going to be about. So we're calling the meeting order at 7:11, and I don't know what's going on with my computer, but as soon as I press the notes, because I was going to take notes, I can't see you guys anymore. So now I'm going to write them. So what is the first item on our agenda? Can you help me out, someone? Because I put it in the chat, but now I can't see it.
No problem. So the first item on our agenda is our chair or co-chair.
Okay. What we
Select
got?
the chair.
Yeah, thank you. So who wants to be the chair or co-chair?
I nominate Ron
think
White.
we should have, okay, thank you, Reverend Boney.
I'm sorry, go on, please.
I didn't hear what you said now. Say that one more time because you guys are talking over each other. We got a nomination for who?
Ron
Reverend Wright.
White.
Okay. Right. All right. Ron, do you accept the nomination?
I do, and I was just going to say I think it is probably should be a male-female tandem here since we got both of each.
I agree.
So.
Okay. So Jackie's not here, so I don't want to nominate her. Let me see who else I have. Let me do my view right so I can see you. Gallery view. Got it going on.
Well, I would nominate you, Lisa Taylor.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should nominate somebody who's not here.
I think we should nominate Tiffany. Tiffany, do you accept the nomination?
I accept.
Oh, let's rock and roll.
All
There
right.
we go. We got Ron and Tiffany. There we go.
Do we want to vote or no?
Well, there's only
I think we have.
Okay. Okay. So now our slate. No, our slate is a co-chair representation from Mr. Reverend Ron Wright and Tiffany Kelly. Do I have a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We got Director Stowe and we got Joseph Hooks. Okay. So congratulations for Tiffany and Ron. Thank you so much for stepping up to the plate and being leaders for our group. Now that you've been nominated and been approved, do you have any opening remarks that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I do. I first want to congratulate Selena doing a fine job and getting us focused from the last email. I think certainly it's inherent that we got to talk about priorities. And, I think we can somewhat simplify what we're doing. And I go by this every challenge that I face. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is broke, fix it and then look for things that you can enhance and innovate. So I think what this leads us to, first off, is finding out, well, what has been working to reduce, if not eliminate, hate crimes, bias, and incidents? Who are the agencies responsible for leading us in those efforts? What are they saying about what's been working and not working? And what kind of enhancements do they want to see? I think we heard clearly my last call from MCPS, the representative there. I put a question in the chat about what their expectations would be from the hate task committee, task force. And he essentially said that their expectation would be for us to partner with them. So as we already know, they're been moving in years past. They have a process for dealing with crimes and/or bias within the school. They also recently endured a long audit back in October, and a report was issued back in April. So there are a number of things that NCPS will be working on that I think we should certainly trust, since most of it has not been implemented in the school. And we will not see probably the experience of the same until school resumes. So that being covered, then it's still a kind of a fact-finding mission. So what MCPS have you been doing to address these issues? What's working, what's not working? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think we have the same investigation analysis within our churches, within our community centers, within other public spaces where we have complaints of hate crime, commission of the same or bias incidents. This would also require us to work with the leaders within these organizations or agencies, so as to simplify what we're doing. You know, again, some of us have a platter, some of us have a plate of things to do. So again, I would, urge us to try to simplify where we're going. Certainly there's a lot of stuff that can be done, and I don't think we're going to get it all done before the sunset. I do want to ask Selena while she's on. Initially, I thought our report date was November the 9th, but I saw subsequently in some email that it's actually in October. Am I right about that?
It's November 28th.
The Black and African American cohort is. Our
No,
report
is
on the
that your
28th?
question? No, that's
Yes.
okay. Let me get that for you. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sorry, go ahead, Reverend Bowling. Or was that Joe? Okay. And so, I mean, there's a, of course we know there's a plethora of information out there. The FBI, the local reporting that we have MCPS data, but I think one of the other things that we have to look at too is getting more real-time data. So the recent report that we got, the incidents for June, if you go to the police website, they have updated to include the July incidents. And not many more than the June, but some of them, are worth looking at, significant. These obviously are not being, many of them are not occurring in the school space because we're out of school, but some of them do touch and concern our school places. But in order to really get the real-time information, then I would suggest that we start thinking about how we do that. What vehicles are we going to do? Listening sessions. I think certainly we have to respect the victims, and the ones who are enduring this information, this kind of treatment, to trust them to provide us the information about what would be necessary to address what's going on. Now, I have to tell you, and I'm going to shut up, that I'm kind of laboring with this because it dredges up some really strong sentiments. I think this is necessary, but as a Black man, African American, whatever you want to call me, in America, some of this is too late because, almost every day we encounter hate, the Black community that I know of, and crimes and hate bias and certainly hate speech. Our history cannot be ignored in the process as well when we try to delve and also come up with recommendations how we address it. But what cannot escape us is what's been causing this. What is a root cause? A root cause is behind how we are treated, either through hate crimes or hate bias, etc. It crosses the spectrum of our lives. I don't care if it's sports, in academics, our churches, our schools, our community centers, our public accommodations, restaurants, retail stores that we still, when we enter, get followed. These may not be reportable hate crimes, but certainly there tend to be bias that engenders, the commission of hate crime, either from one side or the other. Is any of this from retaliation, out of some minor concern in school where someone calls someone a name or is jealous or envious, and the only recourse in that person's mind is to call them a racial epithet or do something that's violent in nature, vandalism or some kind of hate speech. So, I think we want to, certainly put on our agenda digging a little deeper behind these incidents. These are not backwards. These are based on maybe misinformation, certainly stereotypes, retaliation, just a number of things. But when we prioritize the policies, I think we're going to be looking behind what are the causes, what are the root causes. Tiffany, you got the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say again, thank you for the nomination and subsequent election to co-chair. I want us to remember that the reason for this meeting tonight was for us to begin learning about each other a bit more in order to decide exactly what direction we would be heading in. I did express before that it's easy for us to assume that we're all on the same page because we're all of African descent. I never like to make that assumption, particularly given that we have different generations, experiences, etc. And I also wanted to ask a question. How many people here regularly work with youth? Mr. Hooks, I know that you do. Is there anyone else here that does work with youth?
Regularly work with youth.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone here that can say that?
All the time.
I do. This is Jackie Denar.
Regularly is a little bit different, but yes, I do. Jim,
okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, so that's awesome. And I mentioned that because I also do work with youth here in Gaithersburg with a specific demographic. And of course, the first thing I did was not to assume anything. I went in listening to them, and we had focus groups, and I've been able to really gain a lot of their perspective. So I think a lot of the work that we do is going to be perspective gathering. There are going to be blind spots that we all have. And I would like to say that it's sometimes easy to focus on the individual acts of racism, but I'll also say that's the easiest thing to cover up. If you know that you're going to be considered a racist, if you say a certain word, then you don't say that word. I really do like to uncover thinking that is questionable. And sometimes we can't do that by identifying racist things or racist acts. So when I come into these spaces, I am just super open to hearing from people, and I don't label things as racist because those are the easiest things to cover up. I like to uncover thinking and actions that people do every day that they're not thinking about that really does impact minorities, especially in the way of discipline. I think you all the question that I asked about within our schools, we have staff that are causing real harm every single day. What are we doing to address that? What are we doing with the disciplinary outcomes of Black boys, which for the state of Maryland in this county is crazy. So I just wanted to recenter us just to say that we came together today, not to so much attack what we're going to do, but to get to know each other and each other's perspectives in an effort to decide where we are heading and to realize that there really is no finish line. We could emerge from this thing with more questions than answers. And I think that is okay. I think that is essential, that we might not necessarily come away from this with answers. We may say, we don't really know because as we're talking, we decided that it's deeper than this and there's nothing that we can lay out now and this needs to continue. But I don't want us to come in with any preconceived notions of how this work is going to look.
Yeah. Can I just augment a minute, Tiffany? So, and maybe from my little soliloquy, we're thinking that we're just addressing hate crimes with respect to the Black community. That is our priority. But within the Black community, We also have LGBTQ plus. I think they're going to deal with some of that, but we have to deal with that too, as they are a part of our community. And we have religious hate crimes. So we need to include that as well. And in all the other affected areas, I don't think we can exclude from our examination. But again, what I think we're trying to do, and certainly racism plays a big part in what we experience, is to prioritize, the pain, the issues. So we have, data. And I think when we do these listening sessions, we're going to share that data. And then,
May I say, when you talk about the data,
Mhm.
what do you mean by we have data? What purpose does that serve, please?
Well, from the schools, from your first meeting, you had the incidents reported, some in the school, some outside of school from the police department. This is data from June. So it gives you an idea and a scope of some of the crimes and or incidents of bias that are occurring or reoccurring within the school, restaurants, or whatever. So you have some idea about that. It is certainly a fact that we're not going to be able to survey every aspect or every victim of a hate crime or potential bias or whatever. But I think what we're doing in support of the agencies that are doing the work, I think Jim Stowe's agency, vis-a-vis through Lisa with the hate committee, is worth talking to them about and having them to share data, their experience with it. Certainly MCPS, who's been doing the work, we need to get them to share any other information beyond the data they've already collected.
Okay,
The same with the state's attorney's office. And
respectfully say that we need to put a pin in this because this wasn't the reason for the meeting tonight. I think those are ideas that we do need to explore, but this wasn't the call for that. And
but you took us to that point. So I'm just trying to clarify what the mission is, okay? And so in email,
I don't think
the
we can.
email you got, Tiffany, the email you got, it asked us to prioritize the policies. That's what we got from Selena.
I think the email was suggestions.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to pull that up. But again, that wasn't the purpose of the call tonight. So I think that we should probably pause that and set that for our next meeting time.
Well, we can do that. Okay. But I'm just
Because
saying that you put me down that line. I wanted to make sure we clarify, what my perception is, and maybe the perception of the others of where we're supposed to be going with this. And have it to be
Lisa,
inclusive
I think you're trying to
of all
talk.
other hate.
I am trying to talk. All right, we're supposed to do opening remarks. So I want to thank both of our chairwoman and our chairman for giving us their opening remarks. Thank you for that. We're just going to stick to the agenda. So the next item on the, and I am taking some light notes just to let you know, so I'll be able to share that with folks, is a discussion. And I thought what would be helpful for our discussion is to kind of grapple with 2 to 3 questions, one of which is, when do we become conscious of race in our lives? And then why do you think we were picked for this endeavor? So we'll start with, when do we become conscious of race? So we know who we are and where we're going, and as we continue through this journey. Who wants to go first? I'm gonna put Joseph out there because Joseph's all up in there in the conversation. Joseph, what you got? When did you become conscious of race?
Since I remember being alive. I mean, no kid. I grew up in a home daycare. So, I mean, grew up in a diverse neighborhood. Real visual person. And, I'm Black, you're not. Your hair's like this, mine's not. What's your name? Why? Where are you from? Where am I not? What can you do I can't do? I mean, I didn't grow up in the older days. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. So I guess I would say 5 years old, 4 years old, or I can go back. I recognized early that I was different than some kids. You know, being on the soccer team, only black boy on the soccer team, things like that. Why am I here? You know, vocal
No, no, no,
advocate.
that's not quite the question.
I think she asked me, why did I get picked, right?
Yeah, why were you selected, you think? Why do you think you were selected?
And that's what I'm mentioning. Is I'm a local advocate. I'm in the community. I work in the school systems. I have programs. I've testified before. I've you know, been outspoken about the needs in my Pacific community, specifically Montgomery Village. So I actually realized that I ran into Pamela Luckett, who serves, who told me that she recommended me, who works and supports the county council. So I guess very humble to be here and to listen and learn and, you know, share my perspective or do my part. Thank you.
Okay, so I say I have you're a local advocate who works in the school system. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I run the 40 Club that been going for 10 years, a small business, and I've been a contractor, subcontractor at currently at 4 high schools: Walker's Mill, Gaithersburg, Seneca, and now Kennedy. So I have youth development specialists and myself serving on the ground through the DHHS, you know, funding source to provide youth services, case management, mentoring groups, you know, connecting them to either mental health. But I've also done a lot of work. I do have my small nonprofit. Is you know, throughout the years I've done EBB. I've worked in.
Wait, what's
I've been
EBB? What's EBB
Oh,
mean?
Excel Beyond the Bell after school programs. So I've been on the ground serving students from first grade to 12th grade in different various ways through youth services or sports. And I've also done things in the grassroots level through, you know, I'm taking 100 kids to the football game tomorrow on Saturday, to the Ravens games. Hands-on, collaborative, working with many agencies and entities that are doing the work in the county, and, you know, not much faith-based, but more of the service organizations that or nonprofits that are amongst or in or around the school.
Thank you. You just learn how to speak slower so I can type faster.
Sorry, it's football season.
I don't know what that means.
Hey, Joe, how long have you been in the county, Joe?
Since I was 3 years old.
All right. All right. So you all
1988.
Okay. You know everything.
I know everything from where I'm from, Montgomery Village at least.
Absolutely.
Oh, is that right, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Where are you in the village?
I wasn't a real. I mean, I don't live there currently right now as I speak,
okay.
but I would say I grew up in Club Hill, West Stedwick Elementary School.
Yeah.
Know that.
I live here now. That's why I asked the question, Joe.
Where?
I live here now
Okay.
in Montgomery Village. That's what I was asking.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
there every day doing work.
Okay, the 40 Club, what's that?
Just in my business, my LLC
Okay.
that I've celebrated 10 years, and with the amount of minutes I first started with the youth that I was serving and mentoring and training. So I have a website, you know, on YouTube,
What's
things
your
like that.
website?
So 40club.com. Real simple.
Say that slow. Okay, say it one more time.
480club.com.
Is that spelled out or numbers?
Numbers and letters. 40 Club.
All right, I'll look it up. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next? When did you first become conscious of race, and why do you think you were picked?
Okay. This is Jackie. I can go.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. But anyway, I noticed difference in race. When I noticed difference in races were, I guess I was probably about the same age, I guess 4 or 5. And going to, well, I just saw the difference in people, how we look, for one thing. But I never thought that I was any different or better or worse than anybody else. I just knew that people were different. So I really didn't, have the negative feelings at the time. But I did notice when I was younger, going with my mother when she would have like doctor's appointment. And I will go with her sometimes. And then there were a room that had colored on it. I do remember reading colored and white. I was little, but I do remember seeing that. And I asked my mom why. You know, there was a colored room and there was a white room. And so she just said, that's the way things are. But they always make me feel like I would just, I never felt like I was inferior or anything like that. I just knew that we were different. But they never made us feel or accept that we were worse than anybody else. So I really didn't feel that way, like I was, didn't get what I want or do what I want, because my parents always made me feel like I was just as good as anybody else. And they always told us that. But how I got on this committee, but I did work with a lot of, I did social services. So I was a director at the Community Services Foundation, an organization that sponsored a lot of after-school programs and senior programs. So my last job was that. I was a director of a community engagement after-school program for children from first grade or elementary school on through high school. And so we ran a lot of after-school programs, and I spent a lot of time with children. And they noticed some of the differences in the races, but at the same time, I always try to encourage them to feel good about themselves, not to let the public or anybody else make them feel like they were not as good as anybody else were, or as good as white people were. Mm-hmm. And so that's what my experience. And I was asked to be on this committee because I do work with a lot of community programs with my church and social organization that I belong to. So I still have spent a lot of time with young people. And I always try to encourage them to feel good about themselves and not let anybody else make them feel different. But if I see something that I think is, out of that's not normal, then I try to help them understand what's going on. And if they feel like they've been threatened by someone, they should always be able to go to someone in authority, even if it's their parents or their teachers or someone in their church, their, pastor or someone like that, to share the information that they've experienced. So that's what I try to do. And that's how I was asked by Pam also, Luckett, because when I ran the after school program, I was able to work with her on a lot of different projects. She was working with someone else at the time. And so they did a lot of things at the community center where I was. And so she participated in a lot of activities we did there. And that's how I got to know her. And I also know a lot of people who in the community, because I've served a lot of people in different organizations in the community. And I was a member of the Community Action Board as well in Montgomery County. And so we deal with a lot of issues that came up in our meetings and what have you.
Thank you for sharing. Who wants to go next? Let's see who I have here. I have Miss Tiffany and I have Mr. Ron. What you got? And I also have Mr. James.
Well, I'll try to be brief. I mean, the question when you first noticed race, I believe. Mm-hmm. Well, it assumes that it could have been a bad encounter. So my first encounter wasn't necessarily bad. It was when we traveled to New York, in fact, Queens, New York, to visit my aunt and uncle. And at that time, I did not know my uncle had married a white woman. And so all of my first cousins, many of them, are biracial. It, for a minute, kind of raised some issues with me being in an all-encompassing Black neighborhood in Northeast DC. But I saw how he treated her and she treated him. And it kind of set up a model for me about how all of us should treat one another regardless of race. My first negative encounter, however, was at 9 years old. And I must say this was more or less vicarious because I wasn't in Memphis, anywhere near the Lorraine Hotel when Dr. King had his head blown off. But my mother came into my room and awakened me at around 8 or 9 o'clock that evening to tell me my hero had been assassinated. And I immediately, started down a road of distrusting white people. I wouldn't say hating them, but, an immediate concern about the degree of depravity that would lead someone to kill and assassinate Dr. King. And I still see the tears streaming down my mother's face, and the tears that I shared with her. The ensuing security precautions, not only to protect us from other white folk, but to protect us from potential looters, wherein we had to write "Soul Brother" on our windows of our home and of our car. I still remember troops coming down my street, National Guard, maybe even the Army, securing their neighborhoods, while we watched on TV every major aspect of DC burned to the ground. So that experience, certainly gave me this huge distrust, but also convicted me later on that I had to be involved in these activities. It also informed my decision to attend Morehouse College, where Dr. King graduated in 1948. He started there at the age of 16 and finished there at the age of 19. We know the rest of the story. It also informed my decision to go to law school, where afterwards I worked in public service for the District of Columbia. And then I worked in private practice, serving juvenile and adult defendants, mostly in the courts of DC, Maryland, and sometimes at ProHoc in Virginia. It informed me to join Concerned Black Men, where I was a board member for 7 to 8 years. I was in and out of several Southeast high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools in the 80s, then while being beset by the scourge of drugs and death. We don't want to remember the numbers of 1992. There were over 500 murders in DC. The majority of, if not all of them, were Black young boys. What is burnished in my mind also is when talking with youth during that time, and even sometimes today, our Black boys don't think they're gonna live to see the next day. And so a lot of that, not only engendered by the violence, but the bedrock of hate that has been the foundation, if you will, of this country.
Thank you. And can you tell us why you think you were picked?
Well, yeah, I mean, similar to Jackie, I got selected by Pam, but I did a little digging, and it was actually also a recommendation from Agnes Leshner, who I share a board, serve on a board with Interfaith Works. And in fact, I asked her, I said, "Why me, Agnes?" She said, "Ron, you got an open mind. You can tolerate a lot of this. And, we thought you would have something important to say, as you do in our Interfaith Work board meetings. And so if you know Agnes, you can't tell Agnes no. But, so that's part of the reason why I'm here."
I know Agnes as well. I serve with her on the Community Action Board for the Montgomery County.
She's been everywhere, Jackie. I'd say.
Yep.
I think James is going to go next. James, what you got?
I'm going to be brief. I grew up in North Carolina, segregated South, so very aware of race from very early age. All the public places were segregated. I went to a segregated elementary school. They integrated schools in North Carolina when I was going to the 9th grade. So instead of going to the Black high school, which was 3 miles down the road, I was bused to the white high school, which was, I don't know, maybe 10 miles away, not far, but they only integrated the 9th grade. And so we went to a white high school where the freshmen were integrated, but all the upperclassmen were white. And so that was a challenge. Fights every day at school and on the bus, and so very aware of race from very early. Why was I selected? Because I was the previous president of the Black Ministers Conference, and so we tackle a lot of issues on equality, fairness within the county, dealing with the county executive and the county council. So I again recommended by Pam. So that's the reason that I was selected for the board.
Thank you. I think it's my turn. So I will say that I grew up in the South by way of Tuskegee, Alabama, and College Park, Georgia. And my mom and dad were active in the civil rights movement. And so we were the vestige after Brown v. Board of Education, but couldn't afford to live in the white neighborhood. So we actually moved into College Park thinking that we moved on up to the east side. And then we saw white flight. And so we became an all Black neighborhood. And so my mom was a school teacher and thought that, you know, separate was not equal. And so she always made me drive or commute 2 hours to the white side of town so that I could have the best education. And so I saw very early on the difference between not only because of the disparity between Black and white neighborhoods, but being a minority in an all white school. And because we have roots in Tuskegee, we saw the history of the Tuskegee Airmen with Tuskegee University. That was part of how I grew up, and I knew all the folks who worked there, the deans and the doctors and Washington Carver and all the folks who made the foundation for our Black history. And so because of that, I always wanted to be a civil rights attorney, which is what I did. So I think one of the reasons why I was picked was because so I started my career 25 years ago doing civil rights, and was going throughout the country, a lot in the South, and thought, oh, I'm not gonna have to do work in Maryland because we have arrived, we woke, we know. And I started seeing things in the paper and I was like, what's up? We have issues in our state, in my home, in my area. And so I still do the work, but saw that, you know, unfortunately, civil rights issues are everywhere, including in our backyard. And so started being very active in the school system, but also working with the Committee Against Hate Violence with Director Stowe, and see firsthand all the problems that we have, and hopefully think about all the solutions that we can come up with. All right, so I see we have guests. So I don't know if
Lisa.
We didn't do Tiffany.
Oh my goodness, Tiffany! What's up with me? Tiffany, go.
It's all good.
Sorry, I'm trying to take notes and do everything at the same time. Go for it, lady.
So of course I have layers to my stuff. I want to say I first became aware of race. I grew up in the rural South also, but in Florida, which is its whole different thing. I'm a descendant of agricultural workers. So my family worked on the season, they picked the fruit and did all that good stuff. The person first made me aware of race in a very confusing manner was my grandmother. I always said, you can't trust white folks. I know what that meant. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, you know, I'm a kid. What are you talking about, right? And of course, I didn't have the history that she had of seeing things happen to Black people within the community. Like if you didn't go to work, how the sheriff would come to your house and ask why you weren't in the grove picking fruit. So I didn't have that perspective, but she'd always say, don't trust white people. But then I got confused because she was an uneducated woman, but she worked at the school board as a janitor. So she was still really, really connected. So I couldn't do anything because she had the white folks on her side, as she would say. In the community where I lived, it was all Black and white. There was no brown, there was no Asian, it was Black or white. And we would call white people crackers. I didn't know what that meant. Of course, we never heard them call us the other word, but I grew up watching the Jeffersons. So, you know, that was my exposure to the dynamics of race. Moved to Los Angeles, which was everything and everybody. And I went to a very poor Black and Mexican school. That is where I excelled academically because I had a teacher who was Black and he understood the culture in ways that my previous educators didn't. I was identified as gifted very young. However, my academic performance indicated that I was not. But we found out later on that I had a learning disability that was never addressed. So I came back to Florida and barely graduated from high school with the 1.2. All of my white teachers just let me fail. And that was tough. So that was my racial awakening of racism. I cannot identify where I've been subject to racist practices as an individual, but I can say that the systems of racism have definitely impacted my life, but that's another story for another day. Why I was chosen has kind of escaped me, I have to be honest with you. I've only been here for 4.5 years, but Montgomery County has left me with a very bad taste in my mouth. I have a Black son in their schools. It has been hell. We moved to Chevy Chase. So my son was in the elite schools and they simply do not know how to educate Black boys. I was getting calls constantly. When I think about how I was in school, and I was terrible. No one called my mother every single day because they didn't know what to do with me. I would get calls and finally I started calling it out. I'm like, you need to teach my son. You need to manage him. You don't need to call me because he spoke out of turn. They would just do these things that I cannot put my finger on. But the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think a lot of you know this because I've mentioned it, police was called on my son and the Secret Service because he took play money on a school bus. And that was in 2019, 6 months after I moved here. When I went to get answers, no one would answer me. And being that I'm the super advocate that I am, this school district had national attention from every media outlet. And that's when I started to get answers. How could this happen? Why are you calling police because of play money? And then we found out that it was not a one-off, that it had happened to another Black child that was 7. So this county, this school district has some serious issues identifying the harm they are not only causing to its Black students, but to their parents. There was a time that I could not get through my day waiting for them to call me. My teachers, and probably initially don't think the best about me, but by the time we leave each other, they realize what a staunch advocate I am for not just children, but for them. And I think they need a great deal of support. I don't think that the harm is always intentional, but I don't think we dismantled the racist tenets that our education system was built on. And I'm struggling there. I am more angry about race now than I ever have been in all of my life. And a lot of that pain has come from this county and this district. I'm just going to be honest. So I think I was chosen because of my advocacy, because of the very tangible results that I have gotten because of that advocacy. I do have meetings every month along with Racial Justice Now, who is focused on the school to prison pipeline with MCPS. So they know me very well. I've met with the ombudsman several times. I've advocated on behalf of Black children that have been wrongfully suspended along with their parents. So I'm out here in these streets basically So I'm gonna say that's probably why I was selected, but I'm not really sure.
Okay, I took my notes, but I want to make sure I got this right. You said, but you just don't think, okay, no, I think I have it all. Wait, let me make sure. No, I don't have it all. So let me just, you said in there that struck me as interesting that you said, you said, I cannot say that race has impacted your life as an individual. Is that what you said? I'm gonna make sure I get that right.
I
That
think
sounds like after what you said, that's true, but I want to make sure.
I think I said that I could not identify any situations where race impacted me directly, but I did identify the systems of racism that have. So no one's pointed at me and said, you can't get this job. At least I don't think so. Maybe they have. And I think, once again, those individual acts are so easy to cover up. I mean, but when I look at the systems and how they've affected me, oh boy, I can point out so many different things.
Okay, I got that down. I want to make sure I get that right. Okay, did I forget anybody else? Because we have guests. So I'll make sure I got Tiffany, I got myself, Ron, Jackie, Joseph. Okay, Director Stowe, do you have something to tell us?
Yes. Let me get
Who
my,
are you? Because we don't know who you are. Just can you reintroduce yourself?
well, Jim Stowe is the name, and I'm the Director of Office of Human Rights for the county, and have been involved in this work for 37 years. So I have seen a lot, but I've learned much more than I would like to say that I may have tried to contribute, because I still think that that is so important. One of the things, I guess, as I look back in terms of when I first noticed race, my mom was a domestic, and so I would see her every morning going to, quote, work at Miss So-and-so's house. And so I knew that that was different than what my house was. And so I knew right then and there that there was a big difference between our communities. And so very early on did I know that there was, quote, an issue of race and so forth and so on. The rules were pretty open and apparent in the community that I grew up in, where you walked, and who you, in fact, sometimes, depending upon who was walking the other direction, whether or not you had to step off the sidewalk to let white people pass by. That was a rule. Another rule was if two white people are talking, you don't interrupt. That was a rule. There was also the rule that there were certain parts of town that you knew you could travel in, and some of them you could not, or at least it was noted that the time of day would dictate when you could come through there. So all those things were good. I mean, good in terms of they were known. They were not things that you happened to just accidentally fall into because you did not know. These were part of your instructions, as it were, when you were old enough to, quote, leave the house and leave your neighborhood, which fortunately enough, I would tell you now, it was just, I look back on it now, it was such a nurturing kind of environment. I mean, the neighborhood was one that, truthfully, was a village, clearly with all of its flaws and all of the kind of things that are part of any neighborhood where you got different kinds of people and so forth, even though all of us were Black in the neighborhood. Well, there was few exceptions. There were also white people in the neighborhood too. But what a nurturing environment it was for us growing up. So unless you had to go, quote, into town, you get everything you want to do when you get right there in our neighborhood. And so I really thought that was just a great environment to grow up in. And so it prepared us for knowing the rules and then going beyond then our neighborhood as how you need to conduct yourself once you went outside of that perimeter. And so it was that kind of neighborhood growing up. And so our schools integrated pretty early, as it turns out, not the turmoil that many had gone through, but the second time that the real sort of introduction to the fact that race was an issue was because of that integration effort on behalf of the Black community to the high school, there was a cross burn in our yard, or actually my uncle's yard next to us. And so by the Ku Klux Klan. And so we knew that also was another very vivid reminder that there was an issue of race. And it was all because of the schools and us going to those schools. And so anyway, that was a very stark reminder that there was a very unique difference. And the last thing I'll say on that point is the fact that when, although we had good white friends in school, it was always a difference when we were, quote, in public. It was always very different. They never acknowledged us in public. We would be just bosom buddies doing school and playing ball, or whatever the case may have been. But if their parents are with them at the store or someplace out, they would just look the other way. Would even say that acknowledge you were there. And maybe that was another rule, right? That just hadn't listed in the previous set of rules, but that may have been one, that when you see each other in those kind of public environments, you don't speak. And your mother to know, your father to know that you have a Black friend or whatever. But at any rate, those were kind of things that I went through early on. And it's interesting, the work that I do today, as I mentioned, it's been some 37 years, it's been very interesting to figure out how I navigate back and forth in these worlds that I have to live in. On this committee, I think that because of some of those experiences and the work that I do, I was asked to be a part of this group. And again, I'm looking forward to another opportunity to add to my years of learning from those of you who are on this committee.
Thank you.
Lisa, may I have an opportunity, please?
You're the chair. You can do whatever you want, lady.
Say that. I just want to take an opportunity to unpack what I've heard. And would love to hear your feedback to see if what I'm hearing is accurate or can be expanded upon. The first thing I came up with was almost there's a disconnect. And I think that Director Stowe spoke to that. We had a very strong sense of community as people of African descent at some point, almost because we had to. Integration wasn't a thing. And it seems like our strength was in our numbers of concentrated people together working toward the same thing. And some of that seems to have weakened over the years. This is just what I'm thinking. It doesn't mean this is actually happening. Mm-hmm. But there's almost like our connectivity is weakening, thereby reducing our ability to organize and really fight toward this thing called equity, anti-racism, etc. There's a set of people on this phone that grew up under Jim Crow. Actually grew up under that era. I personally didn't. And it seems like they were subject, especially the men, to more demonstrative or violent acts dealing with race. I identify more with the systems that I've been affected by because I just grew up in a different era. I didn't witness that, but to hear that a cross is burned just boggles my mind because that's something that happened a long, long time ago, right? Well, maybe not so long ago now. And I also heard from both of the gentlemen that there are some significant mental health impacts as a result of what has happened to men, especially seeing this thing. So that just kind of is sitting with me also, and that the experience is very different between the females and males on this call. I just wanted to say those were the things that stood out to me as everyone was speaking.
I just want to comment on it because I think that is a very, excellent overview, summary, if you will, of what we would share.
Painful, but
and I think right on point, and maybe a disconnect in a number of different areas, because I think one of the things that happened to us was we fought so hard for integration. And I say this often, so some of the people have heard this, but Tiffany, we had no plan for post-integration.
Yes.
We had no plan.
Mm-hmm.
We fought so hard to be able to go to the same school, and didn't realize that if we go to the same school, what do we do with our principal? What do we do with our teachers? What we do with our guidance counselor. I mean, all those folks who were really, really, in my particular case, my school was 1 through 12. So my teachers saw everybody. They saw my dad and mother. So when you had me as a child, you know, there was a whole series of connections for me in that school because you had all my family.
Yes, sir.
So your particular interest in me succeeding went far beyond just being a teacher.
Yes.
You know, I need to do this for you. And also the issue of how you behave went far beyond just being a teacher, because again, that word got back home, you know, we hit it all the time. But I mean, I'm serious about this. I mean, it was, you know, double doses. We all hear that story from time to time. But I think that one of the things that we didn't do was we didn't have a goal. We didn't have a real way to say, how do we do this thing after the fact of integration? So we had no plan. And so that environment I described to you, and maybe others can relate to this in the same era, it was so inclusive. I mean, it was how you became the man or woman that you were going to become, because all the opportunities to grow. You got all that because through your school, our school, Reed High School, was the core of everything that took place. I mean, everything. We could not go to the movie theater in my hometown. So guess what? We got a guy who, his name is Mr. Craig, Mr. Jimmy Craig, who used to pick up the films for the theater in Charlotte and North Carolina. And what he would do is that when he would have the films, before he would take them back to ship them back to where they would have come from or to the next theater, he would bring them to the high school and we'd have them movie night in the gymnasium for the entire community. So you can imagine, you know, that was our movie theater. And so the point I'm making is that we took what we had and we made it become something much more than maybe what it would have been otherwise. So I think your point is right there. But then what happened beyond the not having the post plan was we moved. We began to travel and seek better opportunities. And so now the teachers that were our neighbors, they got better places to live because they could afford it across town. And so they're no longer our neighbors anymore. And so now they're gone. And then our relatives then moved even further away. So now we didn't have that continuity of family and all those relationships. Again, I'm speaking about myself now. And as a result of all of that, we had nothing to sustain. We had nothing to continue to nurture and to feed what we had back then. And pretty soon, it just became further and further distant. You said disconnect, distant from what we had before. We thought we were going to something better, but the better was never defined for many of us to figure out how to leave us spiritually, because that also was impacted. I could walk to my church because it was the center of my little neighborhood community. And so even that today, you know, everybody drives in, but there's no relationship for most churches. And I don't mean to speak out of turn here to Reverend Boney and also to Ron Wright, who is from Peoples, but oftentimes with those that are right near us in terms of the people who surround our churches, because there's not a relationship. So again, that's just a point, and I'll stop there. But you just turn it on for me, Ms. Tiffany.
Wonderful. No, thank you.
I think you're absolutely right, Director. But let me put this spin on this.
Okay.
And you know, this is, you know, certainly will dredge up some pain, but we're also descendants of enslaved people. And in every aspect of our existence, there's been terrorism, there's been intimidation, there's been rape, murder, lynching. Certainly the, you know, separate but equal was a joke. Just a number of things where maybe didn't allow us to have a plan. And in any plan that we had, there was stiff opposition against that. Unless we forget, the FBI and other government officials put plants in many of our organizations to divide us.
Yes.
Okay. We had every other organization, including Dr. King's SCLC, fighting each other. We were fighting Malcolm X, who essentially wanted the same thing. It's just he wasn't going to turn the other cheek. Okay. He gave us, for many of us, our womanhood and our manhood.
Oh, absolutely.
There was more than a safe haven. Our Black ministers and clergy, they were the activists of the day. They were taking the brunt of this. They were going to jail time and time again. Okay. So, and we look at it fast forward today, maybe not so much, but I would dare say that I'm going to indict them for not. I would say maybe they're thinking this doesn't work that way anymore. I mean, there are some other challenges that we have not begun to see how they're metastasizing to deny our community for a bunch of things, okay? And what we see now from this former president and the other colleagues from that administration and beyond makes us wonder, why will they not stop? I have the answer. The answer is they're not going to stop because this has essentially been their plan from the beginning of time. They brought Africans to these shores. They never had in mind of having us to have any real control, parity, and power. And in fact, the very Constitution written by slave owners and a majority and a 30-something odd rich white men said, "You're not even human, Black man, Black woman. You're only 3/5, and that means I just need that for a vote." So that's where I am on this, and it's certainly. Lastly, I struggle with how we're going to use this background information to inform what we do with hate crimes today, hate bias and other bias incidents. What is our impact from our own environments or our own experience? How will that influence our recommendations on that?
Now,
Well,
what can?
let me
Yes, sir.
pick up on something that you mentioned, Ron, and when we talk about slavery, I think one of the things that we have to understand or realize is that slavery was not a hate issue. Slavery was an economic issue. The Americas needed free labor to build the country, and slavery was the solution to enslave Black people to come over, and they were used to build they were used to build America. And so what we're talking about is control. When you want to enslave a people, you have to be able to control them. You have to oppress them in order to be able to control them. And so even with after the Civil War, when the slaves were freed, you still needed a way to control the people, and so you made them share farmers, where they, in a sense, worked on the farm, but just made enough to get by. You legalize ways of oppressing them by changing the laws.
Oh, yeah.
So that you could victimize Black people, white people could victimize Black people and not have to worry about going to jail, because the laws were structured so that you could oppress us because you needed to control us, because you needed to still be able to use us. And so even what what Reverend Jim Stowe talked about with immigration. Immigration, yes, they were forced to immigrate, but at the same time, you got a group that is still planning. Okay, we're going to immigrate, but how do we still maintain control? And so you maintain control by as soon as possible, you replace the Black principle with a white principle. And so we found that the positions that we had in the Black schools disappeared and were replaced by white people in those positions where you can still maintain control. And so and even with the and you fast forward to the election of a Black president with President Obama, and the changes that Donald Trump put into place, where he put lawyers. I mean, he put the judges. He stacked the courts with the judges. He stacked the courts with the Supreme Court. They began to change the boundaries so that they could eliminate, that they could elect more, that they could minimize the number of Black people that could be elected to office, because the people that are elected to office are the ones that are making the law. So you need to be able to have the people you want in office, so you can make laws that will continue to control those who you're trying to oppress. And so what we have is a system, and Tiffany talked about the system, but you have a system where 1% controls 35% of the total wealth of a country, and 20% control 86% of the total wealth of the country. How do you maintain that? You've got to structure your laws where the majority don't really get a chance to change anything. And that's what we're going to continue to deal with. For Black people, I think the solution is one of the things that we've talked about. Dr. King worked so hard for right to vote. We have to be serious about getting people into office where we can change the laws that are controlling us. That's the laws are what they're using to control us. We've got to put people in office so we can change those laws.
So I want to take this second because there's been a lot said, and I just want to put forward some things that I've heard, again, asking for clarity, not to say I've caught it all. The first thing I have here is a plan for post-integration. And I heard relationships, connectivity, community, and that those things have since left due to integration and people leaving. And what I wrote down here was a shared oppression. The perception of us all being oppressed in the same way led to the relationships and the connectivity. After those perceived oppressions were gone, it seemed that the disconnect began to happen. I started to hear about the terrorism we have been subject to by systems, not just individuals. So I'm hearing that there is a bias hate systemically that sometimes is not addressed. And the third thing I heard that I want to bring to the forefront is the economic issues. And that was said in the context of slavery. But as you kept talking, I wrote down, what are the costs to us? What are the economic costs if we don't make some changes? And not only that, who is benefiting when we're going to jail, when we're continuing to be oppressed? Who is benefiting economically from the struggles within this community? If we trace that dollar down, we could probably see the pattern that is emerging in this still going on oppression. It doesn't look the same way as it did back in the Jim Crow era, but there are definitely some economic ties to us not doing well. And I think that we need to find out who benefits when we don't do well. So those are the things that came up: relationship, the shared oppression piece, the trauma, the systemic hate and bias, and the economic benefits when Black folks just aren't doing well in whatever way that is. And so you continue.
One of the things I wanted to mention to you too, and I saw Miss Jackie there. Is she still with us?
Yeah, Jackie's still here.
Yes. Mhm.
I saw a lot of nods, Jackie. So I'm real intrigued about what you have to your thoughts.
I was nodding because I had some of the same experiences that you did growing up.
Yeah.
And at that time, things changed with our families because, you know, I had both parents, of course, and you did too, I suppose. And we had all the adults, the neighborhood, the teachers, the churches, they all played a part in us growing up. And we were able to do a lot of things, you know, on our own because both parents was in the house. You had your village there with you, helping you and guiding you. And we were able to succeed in whatever we tried to do. And so we didn't have the same issues that people are having now. So things that people are going through now, I never had that experience. And somehow or another, I think that we can do it. If we did it before, why can't we do it now?
Yes.
So that has nothing to do with hate, but I just, that has a lot of, to me, that lends a lot to a lot of problems that we're having.
So Miss Jackie, am I hearing that some of this work that we're doing here might deal with the internal relationships we have within the race, or are you not really saying that?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
It almost seems like a lot of the conversation has gone to what's happened with us collectively that led to us not being able to unify to push this agenda forward.
We can unify, but we didn't have the same experiences, what I'm saying. And so I think that we can, for some reason or not, I just think that we can also be successful in a lot of things that we do, and not just give up and just say we can't do it and just, continue to complain all the time. but I feel like I'm just as good as as white folks. And so even if they hate me, I still believe that I can do what I want to do. I don't use that to hold me back on what I want to do.
So
Even
what do you,
they
what
call
do
me
you
all kind
do?
of names they want to.
What do
So
you
I
do?
think we also need to work with our families to let them know that. And when you feel that way, even if white folks hate you, you still have the right, the same rights they do, because the laws protect you. So you have the same laws that protects them, they protect you. And so if they use hate to try to hold you down, you don't have to allow, I mean, you can overcome, you should be able to overcome that. That's what I'm saying.
I'm going to be devil's advocate here, and that talks to the individual acts of racism. What do you do when the appraiser comes in your house and gives you a lower valuation because you're clearly a Black owner? That affects your wealth and your children's wealth, and you can't really.
If I think mine just is as good as theirs, I would challenge it. I
You
said,
can,
no.
yes.
No, you don't have, who you to say that mine is not as valuable as yours.
Yeah, the thing is, most,
And there are laws that were suggesting that to your point, Jackie, that we can bring to bear on the situation. It is extremely frustrating because it's happened to me. So I know about from experience.
Yeah.
But you can bring the law to come to those situations and aid you to be able then to at least be treated fairly.
Right.
Or here's the other part of that. We shouldn't have to do this, but I'm simply saying that what we did in those communities that we're talking about, I think Jack and I can say we have a similar situation, but and the point you made there on, Tiffany, may very well be at the core of this too. I think the whole struggle to become free was also a shared sense of, again, being in this role of not only being the oppressed, but also this constant focused adversary. It was always them. And so everything we did then to overcome them had a reciprocal kind of outcome, and that was to better ourselves. It's the idea that you were standing right in front of the master and sharing, then, go follow the North Star. You had the ability to live two lives, even in the one you were in at that point in time. And so with our communities, again, going back to my own, so I can speak to, is that, I don't know if anything that I missed out on in my neighborhood, because I had everybody in my neighborhood. Because again, if you want to know a scholar, listen, the superintendent lived next door. So I didn't, of our schools, so and Miss Greer was next door. So my point I'm making is this: is that the environment was such, Jackie, that we felt we could do anything, and particularly if we had an adversary. And we always did it in terms of, we had three people doing it for, or three entities we were doing it for. First and foremost, we were doing it for our family. You got to succeed because your family is counting you succeeding.
Right.
Then you did so because of your community. In this case, the neighborhood. My neighborhood was Rankin Heights. You are representing Rankin Heights. And then, of course, the other thing was your race. You had always these things and everything you did. And maybe that was a load, maybe that was a burden for a lot of folks ready to carry along with them. But I'm saying is, the motivator was there. And so your point, Tiffany, of having that common, my words, adversary or point for which to focus on, provided a catalyst that everyone could identify with. Everyone could identify with. Even if you were doing well, there was always an area of folk which you knew that you still were Black, and somebody else that you're dealing with maybe was not. So I think that, to me, was a curious thing. And I do think there's some internal things going on with many of us as well. So I think your second point also, I think, is significant, because many of us are different places along this continuum I'm trying to describe.
Okay.
Some of us didn't have that experience. Ron did not have the experience I had back in North Carolina. That was not his experience. And even though Jackie and I have a similar experience, ours is different as well. And of course, also, Pastor also was a North Carolinian. So his experience was different as well. And because we have all these very different experiences, and we don't have the opportunity to do this, by the way, I think this is extremely important. And I'm very, very happy with this discussion tonight, to have this kind of discussion that allows us then to see the great diversity within our experiences At the same time, be aware then that we have opportunities then to also share things, right? But to also understand then that there may be opportunities for growth and understanding about, well, why do I feel the way I do about this? Maybe, well, maybe I feel this way because of these things that I'm hearing and have never even thought about that in those kinds of terms before.
Yeah.
But we don't have this kind of discussion often enough, in my opinion, to have these kind of if in fact they happen at all. I am having some opportunities to learn tonight that I would not have had I not been part of this conversation. So
Well, this has been tough for me to hear. I've been near tears a couple times, but it was essential that I heard your experiences. It was a lot to hear, especially from Black men. It was tough to hear. But
What you heard though is the tip of the iceberg.
I don't even want to know. I don't even.
Well, and I want to share it. And what I want to do is certainly, be informed and grow from the various experiences. But I'm sitting here thinking, kind of weighing how impactful this is going to be versus understanding the reason behind why we caught so much from white people. I think, Reverend Boney, you're absolutely right. The beginning of it was to gain economic exploitation and advantage.
Yes.
But also, I'm troubled by the dichotomy between love and hate. I don't think if you loved a group of people, you would subject them to the vagaries of slavery, rape, lynching, working from sun up to sundown. Yeah, they were deriving some money from that, but it was also necessary for them to hate us, to subject us to those kind of conditions. And, maybe we have to forgive, but you can't forget that. Our Holocaust survivors, they don't forget what Hitler did to them. 6 million Jews killed over a 5 or 6 year period of time.
No, they don't forget.
That was hatred, okay? But not necessarily hatred without a reason. There were reasons also why we were picked to be the slaves.
Well,
okay.
but now, Doc, but here's the deal, though. Ramboni, you I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ramboni.
No, what I was going to say is, I think someone had mentioned this already. The way you've got really you've got a group in this country that is really setting direction. They're leading the system. Okay, they put the system in place. They're leading the system, and that the system is not really about white or black. The system is about economics. The system is about maintaining wealth. Okay, that's what the system is about: maintaining wealth, maintaining power.
You said control.
That's what the system is about. And so you need the free labor. But to your point, so there are white people who feel they have a relationship with God. And so how do you soothe their conscience? What you say is that these people aren't really human. Someone already mentioned that. Yeah. Don't think of it as they're human. They're not really human. They're more animal than they are human. And so they're really property. We're not doing anything wrong. And I think that they convince the people that it's not really wrong because they're not like you and I.
Demonize, in other words. Demonize, the same thing's going on. Demonizing folks.
Demonizing is a form of hate. And let me just remind us too, we got, and I, again, like I said, I agree with you, Reverend Boney, but with a caveat that the economic exploitation also comes with a more than a taint of hate. So let's remind ourselves that, undocumented, there were 53,000 lynchings in the US. 53,000. Documented, those that were actually recorded through the court reporters or clerks or what have you, police department, whatever, that were amassed by Brian Stevenson in the Slave Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. Some odd 4,800. Those
But Ron,
not instant. Yeah.
that's moving toward 8,000. Go ahead.
Oh, really?
Yes,
So
sir.
they're still doing the work.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir.
And we focus on Maryland in one case, and Director Stowe knows it very well. George Onward in Charles County, I believe,
That's right.
was reported to have assaulted a white woman.
Mhm.
And before the sun could come down, they were looking for him to string him up. Fortunately for George Onward at this point, the sheriff intervened and secreted him to the courthouse where he was jailed.
Mhm.
A mass of people, white people in the town, congregated outside of the jail, asking for his head, to release him to them so they could lynch him immediately without any due process, without any questioning of any witnesses. They had decided that he was guilty of this allegation of an assault where there, in that time, obviously, probably no forensic information, but just on the, not even the direct evidence from the alleged victim.
Mhm.
He was moved from there by the judge, by the state's attorney to Baltimore, where the sitting judge, at the behest of that state's attorney, said, okay, we'll try him up here for the sake of his safety. Somehow or another, this judge who was in Baltimore, who actually resided where George Onward was from, subsequently released him back down to Charles County, where the mob extricated him from the jail cell, lynched him on site. And I think, in fact, the judge lived next door to the courthouse. Not only lynched him, but burned his body to a crisp. And as he lay dead, burnt to a crisp, they cut pieces off his body for souvenirs. Now, I don't know what hate is, but I think it's that. I think it amounts to that definition. And these were public officials elected and or appointed to protect citizen George Onward. And this story after story, the 1900 massacres, Red Summer, we can't forget these. These are hate crimes, most of which have gone unpunished, and even today. So when we talk about this also, I think there's a mental health issue that we're dealing with. Yet a trauma will certainly over time dissipate the courage to even talk about this. There's an element of fear that this could happen again. And they're stroking that right now. From the White House to Congress, to every hate group that showed up on Capitol Hill on January 6, 2021. Okay, that's hate. And
right.
yeah, there's
I'm going to stop you right there because we're at 20 minutes till we end. So we want to go back to, this has been a very powerful conversation. But I want to note that we have to discuss our next steps in our next meeting.
Yeah.
And also to remind folks of the guidelines for our recommendations, and there are questions that we don't have to have answered tonight, but I think it would be helpful for us to know, because I saw Joseph asked in the chat when we're going to be finished, and we said 8, now it's 8:40. So I want to be mindful.
It was supposed to be 9. I said the wrong time.
I thought it was. I was like, wow, she's trying to cut it short.
Were we supposed to go to 8?
No, 9. I think it's 9.
Oh, okay. So we got 20 minutes. Okay.
So what I'd like to
would you all like to talk about what our next steps will be?
So, of course, we need to set another meeting, right? Of course, I don't know when, and I'll let the group decide. I will put some themes that I heard together just to recap. You know, nothing extensive, because I'm hearing some things that are non-traditional thinking when it comes to hate bias, like relationships, like systemic issues, like trauma. and maybe there's something there that we can build on, or maybe not, we throw it off to the side. But I think it's relevant that it came up tonight, so I will do that.
Okay, I took some notes, so I'm gonna send them to you, Miss Tiffany.
Okay, dear. Okay.
Now-
I think also, Lisa, we need to start with a series of questions. You know,
Okay,
I've written down, and I'll share with the group about
Great.
15 different questions that
Great.
I think will really inform, with, of course, with any, you know, deletions or additions by the rest of the panel, the rest of the committee. But I think, you know, when we answer these questions, we'll be better informed about a roadmap to where we're going.
Chair Wright, if you're capable of, or I can, we should put that maybe in a Google form so that it aggregates everything for us and we can just see it, boom, boom, boom. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can do that and see how that works. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
can everyone access Google, Google Docs? Some people have challenges with that. I wanna make sure everyone can do that.
And if they can't, we'll just do it the regular old way.
Okay, Chairman Wright is gonna put a series of questions and we'll put it in a Google Doc. Okay, and then we need to do our next meeting.
We have to have our stuff together. Was it October 26th?
I believe so.
Okay.
October 26th.
That's
Thank you,
about
Selena.
2 months,
At 7 p.m.
2 weeks, 2 months. Okay.
So when would like to meet again?
Is this a good time? Thursday is a good day, good time.
Thursday is generally good for me as
Good
well.
day.
Thursday's good for me too.
Was
I have a
7:30?
question.
Yes, sir.
Do we know what, okay, not, we know, what is the next meetings? Or have we decided when we decide what the next meeting's focus or agenda is? Is that gonna be between Mr. Wright and you, Ms. Kelly, of guiding that? Like, what's the next meeting about? I do like what Ryan said about things that aren't broke, don't fix it. So when I mentioned like, and maybe these are a lot of in these questions that he's gonna develop, but we talked about leadership and people in place and politics, but I think we have some people in place that have been voted on who either get paid to do this, to lead certain things, and for them to maybe be integrated eventually to speak on what's going on, what's the update, what are you doing, how do you need help, what do you need, and how do we incorporate this being public from our youth voice to our public voice, because us 5 people aren't experts on, and like I said, we have I think a wide range, well, not even really a wide range of generational experiences. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but like you said, focusing, I heard a lot about, schools and our age. So if we all experience things at a young age, maybe that's what we want to focus on. I mean, we can't focus on just the labor stuff or, there's so many different categories, but what's our focus for recommendation? What's our focus on, if having, I've been on I'm on the sports advisory committee. I was on the OLL report. So focusing on who can speak on, right? Like, okay, these questions, okay, Marcus Jones, Will Jawando, Shebra Evans, Brenda Wolf, where you at? What are you saying? What are you seeing? What do you need? I think that can help us because right now, I love the team, but I'm coming from a sports background. I love to know where we're grounded. But then again, today, I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of history. I might have seen my grandfather this weekend. He's 90 years old from Philly, born and raised in the roots of Georgia. But it's like, I'm not a millennial, but I speak fast, right? I'm trying to move. So is next week another storytelling, or are we gonna do some paper on like what are we gonna do? What do we need to do?
Oh,
I just wanted to just put that out there.
Next steps, as I understand them, we are going to compile some overarching things that we heard. Chairman Wright is going to send out a set of questions, and we hope that the results of both of those things will help to drive as to what is the next steps that we want to pursue. If that sounds correct, or if not correct.
So those questions, Mr. Wright, is that something that are we just reading them? Are we answering them? Like, what are we doing with these questions that we don't even know what they are yet?
I think we do both, but let me, before I go there, Joe, first of all, thanks for your service to our youth. I think you're going to be incredible in terms of how we, come up with some real solutions and also getting the information because you're with them all the time. And I think inherent in this group, we're going to be able to touch almost every sector. We have two pastors, Reverend Boney, who's a long-serving minister in this community, and Reverend Jim Stowe, who has also been a public servant for many years, and Lisa, who is not only a civil rights attorney, but serves on the Hate Crime Commission. Jackie has been, incredible in the community. And, I've been out here for a while, 27 years, and Tiffany brings this fresh perspective, more so from her son's connection and his historical experience. So I think inherent in the group that we're going to be probably the best experts as we also learn how to graft the information from other experts outside of our circle. So I think that's where we're going. And again, I mean, it's, I agree, it's a ain't broke, don't fix, but we're going to find some things that are broken. Certainly what happened to Tiffany and her son should not have happened. Is that a hate crime though? Is it bias maybe? Is it by incident? I don't know, but we'll delve into that. And then these questions that I came up with, Joe, are really from the guidance that Selena provided about prioritizing the policies. So we don't yet really know everything all the stakeholders against hate crime and bias have been doing or capable of doing. We need to know that. That's as part of our investigatory duty, so that whatever work we do will not be duplicative. Okay,
Right.
We don't need to be redundant on stuff that's working. But the stuff that's not working, maybe these questions, when we ask them and get the data, either from the mouths of our own children, students, or our practicing ministers and congregants or public spaces, will uniquely inform us as to what is happening and what the responses should be. And I would say this, I want to, and I talk too much, I know, but I'm gonna just challenge us that every day we go out, we practice love, okay? We do stuff that counteracts what we're seeing and hearing. I don't care what group you're from. I don't care if you're queer, dancing with a thong on, you deserve to be respected and loved. Now, if you do something otherwise, that's going to challenge me or my family or somebody I'm supposed to be protecting, then I got a problem. But we can challenge that by being respectful, being mannerable, okay, smiling, asking how you're doing. When I'm on the running trail, on the jogging trail, everybody asks me, hey, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. Why? Because I'm smiling. And before they even say it, I've already said good morning. We can do those small things, and those will over time have some impact on reducing the level of hate bias, and hatred that's behind many of these actions.
Okay, but what I heard from Joseph though is that we might want to consider the bodies or the folks we should be reaching out to. So it might make sense in the questions document to say, who are the interested parties we should reach? And it sounds like some of our elected officials, some of it could be community members, leaders in our community, things like that. So that's another.
Well, I reduced it to about 4 or 5, Lisa, and it might be more you might think of. So it would be the Office of Human Rights, the Hate Committee. It would be the State's Attorney's Office. It would be MCPD. It would also be the Faith Advisory Group. And then I think a major cohort or where we can derive in policies and practices would be the court system. So seldom do we even talk to the presiding judges about what they're hearing and seeing when they preside over these kinds of cases. So, and many of us know several of the judges, and we can pull them in on this. But I think those will be major. Certainly, there's a list that can be added to. if anybody else's organization is doing that work.
Okay, so our next meeting is August the 29th
Yes,
at 7. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep us on track for a night.
I'm sorry.
This is my third board meeting this week, so I'm trying to keep us rolling here. So at 7 p.m. on August 29th is our next meeting, and that's where the Jewish cohort will be presenting. When do we want to meet next?
Next Thursday, the 18th, right?
Thursday, what day?
Well, I'm suggesting 18th, but some of us might be in Ocean City. There's the Mako event in Ocean City with the governor et al. So
Thursday the 17th. The 18th is the Friday. So you're saying the 17th?
Friday. What's the day? Oh, the day is the 10th. Yeah, the 17th. Yeah.
That's fine with me.
That is a week from today. Will we have enough time to do something in a week?
Well, we need to meet every week?
No.
I'm not going to be available every week.
No, but the question is, so our action items are to create a Google Doc with a series of questions, develop a group of stakeholders, and share the notes from tonight's meeting. So, and then we have this greater issue of what our product will be and how we'll present it and who we need, or how we'll do it. So we don't have to meet every week. We could meet on the 24th, or we could meet on the 17th.
The 24th seems to be doable. I think that's a good night.
Yeah, I would say 24th.
I'm good with that.
That's good.
Okay, so we're gonna.
Hey, Lisa, can I add this as an action item?
Yeah.
Kind of move us along. Could someone? I mean, I've already developed kind of an outline what our report should be. Lawyers, we start from the beginning and work back. So the opening is also our closing argument. But you want to know what's going in there at the beginning. And so I think we need to also decide what the table of contents will be as we go towards the recommendations in the final report.
Have no problem with that, but it's hard to do a table of contents. We don't know what the evidence or the witness or any of the people are in the game. So
do we have a template or any kind? I mean, are all these reports going to be different, or has the council provided some information as to what they're expecting from us?
That's a Selena question. What you got, Selena?
Yes, and I am happy to forward that again.
You said again, that means we already have it. Is that what you said?
Well, we already have it.
Don't mind, it's just a click of a button.
Yes.
If we have that, that should be presented. We should talk about that in the next meeting, actually, so that we're on the same page in terms of what is expected of us.
Okay, and I just want to caution, if we are going to have community meetings, we should start thinking about that, the dates for that in our next meeting, because we want to give folks notice and an opportunity to attend.
Yeah, put that on the agenda, please, definitely.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. So I have action items, questions, Google Doc, stakeholders, Google Doc, share notes. We'll review the outline report, and our next meeting is August the 24th at 7 p.m. Anything I miss? Anything else, chairpersons?
Please don't call me Chairperson Wright. Just call me Ron. That's, I'm 64 years old. I don't need any more title.
Sir, yes, sir. Anything else before we close?
Thank you.
We should acknowledge that we have Alex Vasquez here, who's from the Latino Hispanic cohort. Alex, thanks for sharing our moments with us and sitting in with us this evening.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for just allowing me to sit in and just learn and hear the wonderful discussion.
May I ask you a question, Alex? I mean, how far along are you, is your cohort? What are you guys working on as we speak?
Yeah, most certainly. So sorry, something popped up. So our cohort actually met this week. I believe it was on Tuesday, and we were essentially trying to see how we can meet the deliverables that we're all, asked to deliver. We have some events planned, and I think like many of us, we want to do a listening session. Most of us have a lot of experience with listening session. We also have a lot of data that's out there that we have collected over the years from the Latino/Hispanic community. But that all to say, right, we still want obviously the public input from different communities. And so we are working hard to kind of just establish a timeline, just like you guys are, and also having this robust conversation about our experiences as well.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, I think we can call this meeting to adjournment. Does anyone have anything else before we close?
Nope. Good stuff.
All right.
A lot
Thank
of
you so much.
perspective,
Good
Danny.
job, Lisa. Thank you.
I didn't do anything. Well, all right. Take
Oh, you
care,
did well.
guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.